At the moment, I'm an EMT, emergency medical technician, for those who don't know. I'm one of the people that speeds past you on my way to an accident scene, fighting to save lives until I can hand over my patients to the doctors at the hospital. Anyway, I'm sure you understand how that works. So, most of my classes are during the day, but I do have a few night classes. What I'm about to tell you happened about 3 months ago, during a night class. It was winter. Believe it or not, our town was overrun with tourists. People tend to do stupid things before 5 p.m. and after 11 p.m. Yeah, I don't know why. We were going through the basics of delivering babies and what to do in compromising situations arising from delivery when we all heard a loud crashing sound. It sounded like a car accident. There were 5 of us in class, and we all ran out to see what had happened. If you had heard that crashing noise, you would have also immediately thought there must have been casualties. We all got outside and saw nothing. No car, no sign of flames from a possible explosion. Just nothing. We were all very confused. We turned around to go back inside, and then we heard it again. It sounded like a bomb was being dropped right behind us. It was deafening. My ears were even ringing. I saw one of my classmates saying something to another one, but I couldn't hear it. I leaned in closer. He shouted something about maybe it was coming from a nearby military base. I shook my head no. They don't do testing at that base. Anyway, this sounded closer than that. We all stood around, not knowing what to do. And that's when I felt it. A quiet horror sent chills down my spine. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know what it was. A third explosion shook the ground beneath our feet. This one was slightly more muffled. Sounded like it was coming from inside the college. We were all starting to panic. Suddenly, there was a helicopter sound overhead. We heard screaming, explosions, gunfire. But there wasn't anything or anyone that we could see. On the corner, right up the street from our classroom building, it was just Eddie, a homeless Vietnam vet who was a fixture of the area. We all knew him. Students and passers-by always gave him food or money. He was a good person, just down on his luck. Eddie stood on the corner, with his arms outstretched, head turned towards the sky, eyes closed. His mouth was moving. The screaming, the explosions, continued. I called out to him. The moment he looked at me, the noises stopped. No one knows what happened, and no one wants to talk about it. I'm proud of my Navajo ancestry, and I live with my parents on the res. I'm the only male child in the family, so I was expected to follow in my father's footsteps and become a healer. When I turned 18, I told them I wanted to be a photographer and study environmental science. I want to make a difference for us and for the world. I enrolled in college in Window Rock. It's not too far away. I stayed with a friend in Rock Springs through the week and drove home each weekend. Last weekend, I called to say that I wouldn't be driving home because I was going to a house party on Saturday. Me and my friends had a total blast at the party, and around 1 or 2 in the morning, I drove out to Hunters Point with a girl that I really liked. If you know all the back roads, you can get up the mountains to spots with absolutely spectacular views. I drove to this really great spot. We parked, and then we went to lie down on the truck bed and just stared up at the stars. It was pretty great. After a while, we felt something jump onto the truck. It scared the hell out of us. It was heavy enough to make the entire truck bounce. My girlfriend screamed, and I jumped up, of course, to see what was going on. I expected to see a coyote or something, but there was nothing there. Since neither of us are stupid, we both took that as our cue to get out of there. The following Monday, I was sitting in class, and I started getting the creeps. It came out of nowhere. I felt something warm dripping onto my hand, and it was my nose that had just started bleeding, and I never get nosebleeds. I got up and went to the restroom. As I walked in, I was suddenly flung through the air and slammed into one of the stall doors. The wind was knocked out of me, and it felt like I had a dislocated shoulder. I didn't even try to get up. I was just lying there, looking around for what had just tossed me through the air like a toy. But there was nothing. No one. Eventually, someone found me lying there, and they called 911. I must have passed out. While I was waiting for the ambulance, I felt a hot, clammy breath on the back of my neck. I jumped up, completely forgetting about the pain. A lady from the office started screaming, and I felt the blood draining from my face. A man stood dressed in traditional warrior clothing, with a thick black line painted across his face, over his eyes. His eyes were black like onyx, and he held a spear. Without even thinking, I bolted out the door, jumped in my car, and basically flew down the road all the way back home. When I got home, after what felt like forever, my dad said that I had angered my ancestors somehow. He told me it was not a ghost, and that the warrior would follow me until I atoned for my sins. I don't know what sins he's talking about, but for now, I don't feel safe anywhere. Winters in Nebraska get pretty cold. We take advantage of the winter months indoors to prepare our summer outdoor theater productions for the park. It's always been pretty successful. We actually have one of the best theaters in our town. Aside from that, we also have one of the best theater departments. I won't mention the name of my college, or any other names, but a lot of Hollywood elite made their start either here in our theater, in this college, or both. This all started when we were sitting in the Oval. It's like a tiny theater where we rehearse. We were busy rehearsing The Cherry Orchard by Anton Chekhov. I'm not going to bore you with the plot, but one of those characters does lose her mind a little bit. We all joked that this play is cursed, just like Macbeth. So we're all rehearsing, and suddenly I remember getting a chill. I thought maybe someone had come in and left the door open a little longer than necessary, but when I turned around, there was no one anywhere near the door. It was closed. I shrugged it off and turned back around, only to feel that icy chill again. I tried to ignore it, but then I realized that the chill wasn't coming from an outside source. It was actually coming from inside, from my bones. I turned around again. Standing in the doorway was one of our classmates. The instructor had marked her as absent because she was playing the female lead. Someone else was reading her part for her. But there she stood, dressed in a thin white sleeveless floor-length dress with bare feet. Her long blonde hair was streaked with blood, and her feet were blackened with mud and filth. But it was her eyes that freaked everyone out. They were darting back and forth in her head, making her look like a trapped or rabid animal, filled with rage. Then, suddenly, she started screaming and ran towards us. Everyone started screaming and freaking out, scrambling to get away from her. As soon as anyone would come within arm's length of her, she would slash at them with her fingers, bent into claws. The whole time she was growling and screaming as she lunged towards everybody, barking, spitting. She was like an animal. In the chaos, someone must have called the cops and explained what was happening. Before we knew it, they came storming in the theater and subdued her. I swear, you can't make this stuff up. The paramedics got there and strapped her down, then she was gone. We were all looking at each other, wondering if what we had just witnessed actually happened. We were in shock. It was like a bad dream. But here's one thing I didn't tell anyone, and it's really bothering me. She must have bitten me. I have a really painful bite wound on my left arm. First I'm burning up, then I'm freezing cold. The only food that appeals to me is raw meat. What's happening to me? If you thought these stories were scary, make sure you watch this next video here if you really want to be scared.